Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, picture this. An America of brand new highways, shiny suburban homes, a time when the American dream felt, well, more real than ever before. Now picture that same America living with this constant nagging fear of nuclear war. See, this was the post-war golden age, an era of just unbelievable prosperity that was also haunted by this deep, deep anxiety. How could it possibly be both? Well, let's dive in.
So in 1945, America is, without a doubt, on top of the world. Victorious in the war, powerful, and getting richer by the day. But fast forward less than 2 decades, and that confidence, it's starting to crack. The country is practically a tinderbox of tension. So what happened? How did the nation go from the absolute triumph of 1945 to the turmoil of the early 1960s? That's the big question we're digging into today.
We're going to break this all down into 6 parts, but really I want you to think of it as 3 stories that are all happening at the same time. A story of incredible prosperity, a story of global conflict and fear, and a powerful story about the fight for justice right here at home.
All right, let's set the scene. The year is 1945. The war is finally over, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Americans could actually look to the future with a real sense of optimism. But this new era, it wasn't going to be simple. It was a time of both amazing opportunity and huge new challenges that were about to completely redefine the country.
Now, before we can talk about anything else, the suburbs, rock and roll, the civil rights movement, we have to get our heads around the one thing that dominated this entire period, the Cold War. And this wasn't a war with tanks and trenches. It was a global ideological fight between 2 superpowers who had totally different ideas about how the world should work.
And this slide really nails the heart of the conflict. This wasn't just about 2 countries trying to one-up each other. It was a battle over the future of the planet. You had the US and its allies, who were all about capitalist democracy and individual freedoms. And on the other side, the Soviet Union, pushing totalitarian communism and total state control. For the next 40 years, pretty much every single political or military decision was going to be seen through this lens.
So in 1947, America made its mission crystal clear with something called the Truman Doctrine. The new official game plan was containment. The goal wasn't to roll tanks into Moscow, no. It was to stop communism from spreading to even one more country. This doctrine basically committed the U.S. to fighting with money, with politics, and yeah, if it had to, with its military, anywhere in the world to hold that line.
And you can see exactly how that policy of containment became reality right here. That Iron Curtain wasn't just a phrase, it literally split Europe in 2. America poured tons of money into rebuilding Western Europe with the Marshall Plan, while the Soviets locked down the East. Then you get these rival military teams, NATO and the Warsaw Pact, and boom, the world was officially divided into 2 opposing camps.
Okay, so while the world was splitting into these hostile blocs, something absolutely wild was happening back in the United States. The country was in the middle of an economic expansion unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. This wasn't just a post-war recovery, it was a total reinvention of American life.
I mean, just look at these numbers. They're staggering. A 250% jump in the entire national economy, that's not just bigger factories. For millions of families, that meant they could now afford things that used to be pure luxuries. A new car, a washing machine, maybe even their own house. It literally created a huge new middle class and completely changed the American standard of living.
And here's the result of that boom. By the mid-50s, a whopping 60% of all Americans were considered middle class. Now think about that for a second. How revolutionary is that? For the first time ever, that American dream of a nice house and a stable life wasn't just for a lucky few, it was the actual reality for the majority. And that created this powerful culture of optimism and, well, consumerism.
So how did this all happen so fast? Well, it was kind of like a 3-step recipe. First, you have the GI Bill, which gave 16 million veterans easy access to cheap home loans. Second, developers got really good at mass-producing houses, building entire towns of affordable homes, like the famous Levittown. And the result? By 1960, a third of the whole country had moved to the suburbs, creating a whole new way of life. Hey, if you're finding this deep dive into history valuable, do me a quick favor and hit that like button. And make sure you're subscribed for more explainers that connect the dots of history.
Okay, now let's bring the Cold War back into the picture. Because all that tension didn't just stay overseas. It seeped into American life and fueled this massive wave of anxiety, fear, and a huge pressure to conform. This was the dark underbelly to all that shiny suburban prosperity.
And that fear had a name: McCarthyism. Basically, a senator named Joe McCarthy led this national witch hunt for communists that just swept the country. With totally reckless accusations, he created blacklists that ruined the lives and careers of people in Hollywood, in government, everywhere. The message was loud and clear. Just conform, don't ask questions, and whatever you do, don't seem different, or you could be next.
And this paranoia didn't stop with suspected communists. There was also something called the Lavender Scare, a moral panic that led to thousands of gay and lesbian people being fired from their government jobs. They were labeled security risks, supposedly easy targets for Soviet blackmail. It just goes to show how intense the pressure to conform was. It targeted anyone who didn't fit into this very narrow box of what it meant to be American.
This quote from the economist John Kenneth Galbraith just captures the era's central paradox perfectly. On one hand, you have ordinary people with access to things, cars, TVs, appliances, that were unimaginable a generation earlier. But on the other hand, they were living in this climate of intense political and psychological fear. This, right here, was the golden age of anxiety. Now, at the very same time all this is happening, that third major story is unfolding. The civil rights movement rose up as this powerful, organized challenge to the status quo, demanding that America finally make good on its promise of freedom and equality for all its citizens, and taking direct aim at the whole system of Jim Crow segregation.
And this wasn't some sudden explosion. It was a movement that built momentum year after year. As you can see on this timeline, you have these key federal actions like Truman desegregating the military and the huge Supreme Court ruling in Brown versus Board. But when states pushed back, like in Arkansas, the federal government had to actually send in troops. This constant escalation led to massive protests like the March on Washington, and every single step was a major hard-won victory.
The movement's core strategy was nonviolent direct action. So activists would use things like bus boycotts and sit-ins to peacefully defy segregation laws. And this created a really stark picture for the rest of the country to see. America was out there promoting freedom around the globe, but back home, its own citizens were being violently suppressed for demanding those same freedoms. And crucially, that violence was now being broadcast on TV every night, which shocked the conscience of the nation and built a ton of support for the cause.
And that brings us to the early 1960s, which is where all three of our stories, the Cold War, life at home, and civil rights all come to a head. The Cold War reached its most dangerous point ever, while a new, younger generation of leadership was promising to take America to a new frontier.
Yeah, the Cold War was definitely no longer cold. The Korean War was a bloody, direct conflict against communist forces. Then, when the Soviets launched the Sputnik satellite in 1957, it caused this national panic in America and kicked off the space race. And in 1961, the Berlin Wall went up, this brutal, concrete symbol of a divided world. The stakes just kept getting higher and higher.
And then came October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. For 13 terrifying days, the entire world just stopped. The US and the Soviet Union were eyeball to eyeball, literally on the brink of a nuclear war that would have ended everything. It was, without a doubt, the single most dangerous moment of the Cold War, the ultimate expression of all that anxiety.
And yet, out of all that tension, a new sense of purpose and optimism began to rise, and it was perfectly captured by President John F. Kennedy. His famous inaugural address was this incredible call to action for a generation that was just hungry for change. But that promising new frontier was tragically cut short by his assassination in 1963. That one event just shocked the nation to its core, and it really marks the end of this post-war era, opening the door to the much more turbulent times of the mid-1960s.
So we're left with that central question. Was this a golden age of prosperity, or was it an age of deep, gnawing anxiety? I think the true legacy of post-war America is that it wasn't one or the other. It was somehow both at the exact same time. A nation of new highways and perfect lawns, all while being haunted by the bomb and finally starting to grapple with its oldest injustices. This period really set the stage for the turbulent 1960s and everything that came after. To see what happens next, go check out the next explainer in our U.S. History playlist or explore another topic right here on the channel. Thanks for watching.